What is the value of sincerity for a temporary being? What is this idea of the invisible journeyers through the cultural program? The idea came to me simply in the sense that we human beings are not putting an attempt to create an honest civilization. We're trying to just get by. And when you try to get by, many opportunities are not valued properly and many things go missed out. And something that every civilization, every generation of history has been concerned about is what technologies are lost and what technologies are found. And really, guys, in this lifetime of mine, I've seen many people. I have wondered about what is moving everything, and I have considered if there's a mind to it, or if it is mindless, or if it is comprehensible, or if it's incomprehensible. And really, what I notice is that we are hiding through language to navigate in the cultural program in ways where our actual inner life can't be seen. So I feel that the reason there is the mob mentality or the cruelty or whatever, it is simply because the space is not pure from the beginning. Now, what do I mean by purity? Purity is a concept that externally it was of course brought forth more in focus. Um, at least the way I kind of got acquainted to it was that religious ideology, there is a pure component to it, and believe it or not, every religious person that exists in this world that entertains that framework, that viewpoint, in some sense is seeking to become pure in the eyes of the divine will. So, in other words, if you consider there is a mind administering everything beyond your mind, pretty much your relationship would be with that mind. I see people, it's very easy to hide beyond language, and I can tell you our species and its attention, the attention span of the average man, there are many blind spots. And if we as creatures do not become conscious of the language threshold, we do not become conscious of our inner realms of the subjective evolution and the subjective realms, it will be as if we are not acknowledging something we're using. Imagine a person has a sword and a shield in their hand and they're not using the shield, they're just using the sword. So it feels like something they're just carrying, they're not using. But when it comes to any sort of challenge in this life, the mind is applying itself. Do you know? It means that your inner realms are your response to your outer realms. Now, this concept of an inner realms, I really looked at it and I felt it was an idea distant. It was an idea distant from humanity. It was as if something that people don't really care about the meaning of stuff, they care about the direct experience they're getting. If you really look at it, kids are revealing what human nature seeks. And when you look at children, it's as if it's a participation. So I can't tell you how important it is to create an all-inclusive sort of participatory civilization. Right now, the civilization is, if you entered it well, you stay in a good position, or you endure, and there's always higher classes. But it's something where, if you have not had a good entrance in it, it's as if this machine is blind to you. I remember in one of my science fiction works, because before I create any science fiction or write it, I look at the world. This is a good approach I find to knowledge general. Pretty much, when one wants to learn, okay, what is learning? What is happening? There is a self in a world, and this self dictates how the relationship of the world is to its own eyes. And it does it through comparison, through rationality, through various comparative modes, modes of perception. Pretty much um, we have eyes, and we're comparing it, and we're polishing our own eyes. The internet is simply that, the access to information we get. It's like, you don't know how much the internet was like, uh it was in some sense like, if I was thirsty, it satisfied the thirst of my mind. Because you see, there was a time where it took a while. Do you know there was a time where you couldn't find a book anywhere because people didn't even care about writing? And then when a book came into development, it was like the first time machine. Writing was the first sort of time travel, or time, or relevant technology we had. So for me, the reason I write, you know and oftentimes I like speaking, because in speech one gets way more content out than if they were to write it. Sometimes when I say a sentence, for example, I could say a couple modes of it when I speak it, but when I have to write it, it's just like you choose one out of the many parallel realities. There was something about this wallpaper that was very appealing to me. And I don't know, I think it's like there's so many moments of life that we don't care for as human beings, that we don't get to see, you know? And it's honestly fascinating, because that they looked back at their own ancestors and they were like, "Oh, yo, they had it harder than us." So whatever we endure, the future generations will look at us and probably be like, "Oh my God, how did they do it?" You know? Something that I still, how can I tell you, it's not a issue of communication for me. It's an issue of uh, commonality and reality and permission, I would say. You see, attention means there's more out of the moment being seen. And sometimes when you see more out of the moment, you sometimes see, how can I tell you, details that are unnecessary. And I can tell you that the intellect is not the intellectual approach should not be the only approach. It's missing a dimension. You see, we are not purely rational creatures, and we're not purely irrational. We are world builders. And the type of world we experience, our senses of self step out of. And so I'll tell you, I've walked on this planet in many different ways. And in 2011, I was kind of trying to become believe it or not, investor banker, like investment banker. I had kind of talked to someone who was, I had found a way into this financial firm. But there was something that happened that I can tell you an experience in one moment can change the value of all moments. There's something about having a day to live and not living it as yourself that I feel ends up being at the end of the day some sort of pent up regret. And that solution to that regret is, you see, some people are shaping life extremely solid, so they want a solid outcome of it. Some people are like looking at it in a more liquid kind of state, so they're just going with the program. And there are some people who are perceiving it as gas, they're not even considering. It's as if they already saw the status quo and they're like, what's next? You know? When I was living that life pre 2011, it was a sort of okayness. There was an okayness in my mind to be artificial for the moment's sake. It took me a while, I'm telling you, to learn this. And I can tell you that some people bring it with them because I have a twin brother, and his presence and personality was totally different. So we were like two kids going in the same experiences, in our youth, and we ended up becoming two different personalities, you know? And so I realized it's like there is inner work done. And I guess when you see a person's engagement in the moment of being and how they pilot their moment of being, it has to some degree has to do with the familiarity they have. Because the cool thing about life is that if you want to objectify your subjective experiences, you communicate, you externalize, you move, you speak, you write, you know? But if you want to take an objective phenomena and subjectify it rather than taking a subject and objectify it, that would literally mean a return to the witness. When I say witness, I mean before you were named as a human being, you were the presence of attention in a moment. Everyone is being that. That is believe it or not, the unconditional clue that everywhere you have traveled in this life has come across as a moment of now, now, now. So it's like, isn't it strange that we're experiencing life day to day as individuals, like now, now, this moment, this moment, this moment, like moments going by, it's like dots, but on when we look back at it, our minds perceive these dots as a line. And so the brain is aware of its own trails. Do you know? There was this very profound kind of savant named Daniel Talbot. Daniel Talbot. And this guy memorized 10,000 digits of the number pi, 3.14, da 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 da. You know, he memorized 10,000 digits of this random sequence. And so that fascinated me. And I went and I found this book where he was explaining it. He's written this epic book called Numbers. It's actually a very insightful book. And he's kind of explained what his inner life was like. And he said it was that when he sat down on that chair, and there's like eight people with papers checking that everything he's saying is correct or not, this kid closes his eyes and starts saying the exact numbers of pi, like after 3.14, 10,000 after the point. So he's going on, and in his book, he writes that his experience of it was behind his eyes, he was walking in a world. He was lit like the number whenever he would see something like tall, like in his inner realm, that would be the number nine, and he would say the number nine. So in other words, it was as if his ability to remember all those numbers came from an inner experience of a world. So, in other words, this was a man who had an ability to close his eyes and still be in a world that he can navigate in. Now, of course, in regards to a kind of a neurochemical analysis of what was going on with that person, you see, I find it is too hard to trace. I feel life is sculpting us. It's like before the sculptor has an opinion to see how the shape was, its hands are already resculpting, and that's the nature of change. So this person in his inner realms was seeing the world. Now, I often speak about the inner realms, but what is it that I see behind my eyes? I feel, of course, every person is different. For me, before there is movement, there is this intense and sort of ultimate acknowledgement that whatever communication, whatever expression done or that occurs, it is all returning to the silence and stillness at the end. So when I find myself comfortable, and I've had many experiences that have made me comfortable with stillness and silence, and in other words, then there is no issue with speech, as if there never was. You see, a lot of what a person's psychology is the distrust of their inner realms of the outer, or how they are projecting the outer. A civilization that trusts itself becomes advanced quickly. A civilization that distrusts itself doesn't become advanced. And it's the same thing in everywhere. Whether it's family members, if they trust themselves, they advance. If they distrust themselves, they don't advance. You, as a human being, if you trust your ability, you advance. If you distrust your ability, you can't advance. You haven't even allowed it. You know? So that's the thing. This is the most crucial thing that in Zen, they kind of made it clear that if you are to climb a mountain, start at the top. And if you think about that for a second, it means you as a human being, instead of waiting to get to heaven, see the heaven now. Do you know? Where else could the here and now be, really? It is the simultaneity of action, particles in space that have been owning themselves as a thought, pretty much as an idea. We're holding the banner of an idea, are realizing that beyond their limited perception of themselves, they are part of a process. The process of nature is immense. And so, pretty much, I meant of the reflection of how you as a being felt expression was okay. So that's why there's the invisibility factor in culture. When you look at culture, people are appearing firstly as objects to one another, and then when they communicate, subjects impressions begin to be made. Okay, now these impressions I personally find are ultimately very far. I feel if two people meet, person A and person B meet each other, you know, and they've never met each other, and they're totally two different people from different parts of the world, it's as if they will totally have different impressions. So you see, it's like the more common the language, the more common the imagery behind the language that the two people are acknowledging, the more the world is real for them, as if they're in the same room. The less the language is comprehensible to both, that means imagine two people speaking two different languages and two people speaking the same language. So if two people speak the same language, the commonality is a stronger bond. I'm simply trying to say that we have to put an effort as 8 billion different as 8 billion creatures with different inner realms to somehow work on this rock in the middle of nowhere. The greatest inspirational speech of all time is this: human beings, you're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. What are you going to do next? That's the greatest inspirational speech. Because I've thought about it, guys. I've thought about, all right, immortality. That sounds cool. There's the legend of the Fountain of Youth. That sounds cool. But what is continuing? And that's the thing. I find nature is a performer, and we are its performance. And we are a performance of nature, the universal sector that has become conscious of itself. And this performer, for now in the temper, in it, like in the conscious waking state, you can pilot. In the dream states, some people can pilot, and sometimes you can pilot. And in deep sleep state, you can say, you are being piloted. You are a non existential passenger in the whole process of existence. In deep sleep, you know? When I speak about the cultural program, guys, you see, I have kind of the blueprint that I see to the design of the moment. It is much more complex than our mainstream has acknowledged and our whole civilization has acknowledged. We are still trying to see good and bad people. We are treating our truths in the same way. We want good, and we're defining good truths based on bad truths. And so, really, individualism is choosing one side to manifest. But beyond individualism, beyond how we are people, what is this presence of intelligence here? What if there's a percentage, 0.0 whatever amount of 0.001% chance that actually there is a shadow to the world? There's a world and an anti-world, like antimatter. And what if there's consciousness pervading in that antimatter? What if matter has not become just conscious of itself? Space has also become conscious of itself. What if space is the body of a collective mind? There are many mysteries in this world, but one thing we know is that life appears to be like a dictionary we have to update. And the new words that are in that dictionary are the new advancements of humanity. If life is seen as a performance, that totally changes the mentality of every day of living, from an outcome orientated kind of view where you want to get something out of life so you don't care about the journey until you get it, you know? Or you become like how the Shaolin masters, how the Zen masters, Shaolin masters had to study Zen, of course. And there was a sort of abidance, especially in the Taoist universe. Taoism is very beautiful. And it is the home of the unfamiliar. The Tao is the home of the unfamiliar. That means Some people feel their home is physical. What if your home is a state of mind? What if there are states of mind that if every being, like if their DNA is a unique instrument, once they play it suddenly, they tap into rhythms in their inner realms? Can we be a species that is conscious of our inner realms? And I find a very beautiful way of kind of explaining it is that we had hunter-gatherer societies, and imagine being the first person who found berries and brought it back to the tribe. You're like, yo, guys, I found berries. And the hunter gatherer tribe society is like, whoa, whoa, there's berries here, you know? So everybody starts getting access to berries, you know? So now I find the same thing is repeating, but for the subjective realm. There's the subjective evolution is echoing the objective evolution, but with a strange witnessing freedom. And so the subjective evolution is we have to pretty much now discover various states of mind, journal them, and share them. 1.0 would be getting ready for civilization 2.0. And then a certain set of transformations require to occur in regards to education, in regards to the defining of what the mind is, and in regards to technological value and even political aim. Right now, I remember kind of that this mayor had once said that the most valuable thing that society needs is honesty. And when you think about it, honesty is pure human expression. Dishonesty is impure human expression. It doesn't mean it's impure. That means every expression is kind of new, but the person is choosing to act from the shadow. And it's like this psychological, social, I think, kind of conditioning where the person has to accept what is there to be a part of it. And if the person wants to behave differently from the cultural program, they will feel maybe they're invisible to it. But here's the catch: even if you are not yourself in society, you have been invisible from the beginning. So actually, society is the only place where who you really are as a being can become accessible to others. You know, and most people in society are thinking about other people first, then themselves. Let me tell you, an advanced civilization, I created this playful word. I called it elegance. Like, you know, the word elegance? Yeah, I just saw a C in there and it was elegance. Yeah. Sorry, not a C, an L. Um, uh, and what it meant, what I kind of saw that word being an infusion of was an elegant glance, an elegant vision. You know, so many people, I feel they have a inefficient outlook on the whole system and then are trying to be efficient in it, so they always feel they're suffering. But if you have this mentality where you're in an efficient system and you're here to reduce the inefficiency, that is a different approach, you know? That means there's some people who are just thinking, I'm going to go achieve this and this and this. And when they don't achieve it, they get bummed out. They're like, oh, why? Universe, why? God, didn't you hear my prayers? What is this? Why? But the person doesn't realize that it is how the mind is set into motion. And this may be an interesting concept that perhaps when you wake up, the reason you have consciousness is just like a bowling ball to set the day into motion. For me, believe it or not, If that where is how the world has come across to us. How, believe it or not, it's very poetic. As much as you feel you have entered this world, when the sun comes out, the world enters your eyes. Actually, you know, it's like this kind of simultaneous relationship where you need the world to have eyes, and the world needs your eyes to know it is here. And so this is why humanity is very profoundly is not here to be the most advanced civilization, but you can say it is the certainty of the gods of themselves. And so there, in certain ancient traditions, they saw it wasn't just like one physical room that was a world. The world had various dimensions, elevations, and it was that in the actions of people. For example, the Stoics, who cared about behavior, it's as if their path to truth was behavioral to them. So that would be a sense of like a person abiding. When you look at all any sort of spiritual practice or religious practice, the person has to follow something, isn't it? But let me tell you what you're here to follow. You're here to follow the, for the first time ever, the new journey of your life. We disown ourselves from novelty, and that is when our attention gets trapped in the past. Novelty is you. You're not here to be who you were yesterday. You're here to be someone who you haven't even seen yet. That's the efficiency of life, because it's in a business sense, it would be like, I remember hearing this from Elon Musk. He said it well. He said it's like this dude like has a lot of remarkable businesses and kind of unbelievable businesses, and when he attempted it, it was as if it was obviously failure. It's as if he was trying something that his in the long term he saw success, but in the short term everybody was like, are you like the, he must have felt like a fool. And so I think great things have like this phase of this beginning phase where the person will feel a fool for a long time, and only their inner vision keeps them going. And if they follow up with that inner vision, then it was never about the short term when you move on into the long term. So that means really, who can know they have failed if they can still try? Pretty much, that's the idea. um, Elon Musk said that instead of seeing a business that's going to succeed right away, he was just trying to reduce the percentage of failure. And I found that to be so like, I found that to be the metaphysics of to have a metaphysical beauty for an engineer. Do you know that it's as if the world is obsessed with success, but you in your corner are just trying to reduce the percentage of the failure, you know? So what does that mean? That means it's kind of like Rumi says a similar thing. He says there's parallels to that too, where he says, uh, what's the exact quote? Let me see if I can remember it. He says, your task is not to seek love, but to break down is to kind of look at what is in front of you, what value it has, how the self and the world relationship is being projected in the moment, and with that hypersensitivity, you'll come into the attributeless, endless, awe-filled moment of sight and presence. So it literally, it's as if when you pay attention to how you're being, there's no action you can do to be aware of your being, because you're already being. Do you know what I mean? So every person who went towards becoming one with everything, that was another way of saying the ideological self was no longer the prime mover of the free will. The free will had access to greater experiential rhythms at that point. And so this may be a strange concept. I mean, I'm me personally, I it's not that strange for me, uh, but I'm just one guy, you know, one ant on the hill. But I'll tell you this: it's like this in Shintoism in Japan. They had this concept where people didn't have an individual soul. All objective matter was a vessel for a highway of souls. Okay? And so, what does that mean? That means we are so archetype, subject bound to know our objective reality that if the subjects go away, we feel the object is lifeless. Do you know how many things are moving with life before they are named? Do you know that the greatest linguistic professors are saying that there was meaning before there was language? There was vision before action. There was a mind before a body. And so, if the mind is attributeless, it's as if your awareness is the eternal invisible journeyer, and the cultural program or whatever program. So it's like I don't know, but I have this playful relationship with my own physical body that it's as if all the atoms that make my biology, my physical body, they are in my service. It's as if when I look at my physical existence, it is as if like it's something has given me. I don't want to even say something has given me. It's something given which the conscious being can only use to give back. I am telling you, there is an empty handedness at the moment of transition out of this plane of existence, where if the pilot has not become conscious of the as the whole plane of existence, stories haunt uh, 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 the karma of the individual. You see, karma is another way of saying just it's just limited to the dualistic dimension. The moment you suddenly identify that your mind is your whole moment, I laughed. Do you know how much, guys, I've laughed at metaphysical self-inquiry when it was the most profoundest things? And what it was I asked myself, okay, who has karma? And the concept of karma is pretty much, you can say, cause and effect before cause and effect. The terms were made. And so when I asked myself, who has karma? Then suddenly came my, believe it or not, my inner filmography of my life. And then I realized, am I a part of the moment or am I the whole moment? And when my mind realized it was the whole moment, it was the ultimate friendship of soul and matter. That means, I don't know, but I feel there was a sort of experience that went through that I befriended uh, my moment as a sort of unknown presence. And this instrument that this lifetime is, it's like a DNA is an instrument where you can't just play it with the mind. Sometimes its greatest melodies come from the heart, and the heart means you as a human being. You allow yourself to be vulnerable, which is another way of saying that you are literally putting your patting the head of your inner child, and you're like, it's okay, little guy, you know, you know. The little can't exist without the big. And so the inner fragmentations of the psychology singularize, you know? And that's what the clinical therapist is attempting to do, you know? But I feel it's impossible because on some level, it's like any person who has a sort of problem, inner problem. And when I say inner problem, you see some problems are self-created. When you stop creating it, the problem goes away. And some problems has to do, of course, with the wiring of the perception of the person. That means I'm not ignoring matter 100%, even though I'm saying there is something beyond it. And honestly, guys, if somebody, I don't know, if I ask myself, what did you do in this life the whole time? I would say I just, it was all like putting my foot on a gas pedal. That means when the opportunity of effort is there, when the stage, the spotlight of the stage is there, when you have entered conscious existence, experience is the key to any door. When you don't fear your mind, uh, no objective phenomena can touch you or has ever touched you. It's like this is what the mind is, it's the actor and the audience member at the same time, and they can simultaneously adjust one another. What does that mean? That means every word I have said, I have also heard. So right now, as I'm sharing this talk with you, I'm also hearing it myself too for the first time. You know, beyond the inner realms. Yeah. We have to pilot the most evolutionary, uh, the newest evolutionary update. Life, its purpose is not to only be found, it is to be built, it is to be designed. It is the task of energy to implement itself, and the human framework. I don't even feel we as human beings should see ourselves as human beings. I feel we should see ourselves as moments of being which, for in certain moments, appear as human. I feel we're much more sophisticated than the earth reveals in the mirror. I feel behind our eyes, our inner realms are like the sky. They can be endless, and they can also be endlessly void. You know, Friedrich Nietzsche said God is dead and man killed him. And I kind of created my own uh, kind of tribute to Friedrich Nietzsche of the same style. And I kind of said that the world is dead and cyberspace killed it and technology killed it. What does that mean? That means all human choices are either towards more life or towards less life. And the efficiency and the inefficiency is based on really the attention in the moment. That means, think about it this way, that your mind is not just you, it is something the whole moment of awareness is being, holding, wielding. It's like the mind is like the greatest weapon because it is the scanner of the moment, it is the update, literally. And so imagine if we started treating the brain as some sort of multidimensional antenna where we can communicate the inner realms. Can you imagine what kind of remarkable educational system we can build where we use the content that is abstract, the abstract, you see, reality is a certain series of acceptances, and these acceptances are changing all the time, and they are sometimes changing as simply as just a person passing away and a new person coming there, you know. You know, it's kind of like this. I think consciousness or attention has awakened to the moment. And this attention awakened to the moment finds itself in a literally room filled with endless gifts. And it is the choice of this attention to open the gift of the moment. And every moment has a gift, every moment has a hidden better way it can happen if you just endure. At some point the person has to make a decision, the pilot has to navigate, of course, but it's one of those things where I am telling you there is a beautiful dimension to life that opens up where the simplest version of you is okay with the world being simple. And so Gandhi has this quote. He says, "There's more to life than increasing its speed." You know, when you increase life speed, usually you're trying to do it because you want to increase the quantity of something, but you don't understand that the quality of life, the process, the way that how every moment is a mindful performance to the Zen master, to the Buddhic mind. Do you know there was a gentleness? There was in that gentleness. The more physically you're a gentle person, let me tell you, your inner realms also echo that. So when I speak intensely, when I speak really fast, my inner realms, it becomes like a film. Do you know? But when I speak very slowly, it's as if it's like throwing every thought that's evoked is like a rock thrown in a pond and it ripples. It's like I can the silence. Here's the thing. It's like that means consciousness may very well be explained. I remember in this book I had wrote in 2013. It's unpublished. It was called Highway of the Stars, something like that. Building a highway to the stars, something like that. And it was inspired out of a dream I had, where in the dream I was looking at this dark sky, and I was seeing. You see, you know how you see stars? I was seeing the stars slowly moving in a line. You know, and for a second, millisecond in that dream state, it was as if for a second I noticed that if we had like spaceships in our orbit, it would kind of seem like a highway of stars. Yeah. A technology will be born from light and sound that will, I feel, geometrically explain consciousness. That was the idea. A unique technology that hasn't come yet. I don't know if it's. I think it might be in my lifetime, maybe not. But it's a technology that is the child of sound and light. You know, that's as poetically as I can say. And I feel it's the relationship that light has with sound, because we need light to even be able to see something, to even be conscious that there's someone that's conscious that there's sound, right? So we need a world before the self, or where is the self appearing? And if the self appears in the world, it could be a dimensional switch, because the way you look at, for example, you know, more ancient texts, even Abrahamic context, man went through a dissension. So a dissension would mean some people are thinking that man evolved from the earth, but if the world is multidimensional, man fell from somewhere else to the earth. So it's as if there's this eternal lack of comfort with the dimension that one has not arose from. You know. So you see, ancient worlds is fascinating. There's so many theories on evolution that it's fascinating, really. More materialistic ones are, for example, it's maybe like some sort of cell or chemical that came, some particle or cell that came, like it was a dust from one planet with intelligent life that came on our planet, you know. Or my personal idea is that it was light. Light is our psychology, is our morality. Even religion has light and darkness. It's pretty much this on and off switch effect is the explanation of the dualism of our psychology. I consider at least. So, anyways, I've written a lot, and it's kind of like after some time, it feels like every day is being written by the attention. It's as if I have felt, just like how, you know, uh, the pen is in one's hand, I have felt my attention to be in the hand of my whole moment. So ultimately, the purpose of all action is simultaneously being a value in a dimension. So that it's another way of saying in one dimension you can fail and succeed, in another dimension you never could fail or succeed. It wasn't even that sort of design. Oh man, this thing was on mute. Shit. So guys, can anybody, any of the viewers, tell me how long the gap was? These are black holes in these talks, okay? you know, you find black holes, beyond the clouds, and also and sometimes in these Mr. Within talks. Our attention authors our meaning, and we can pilot our attention. And compared to all the other species on this planet, pretty much, guys, in that gap, I don't know how far people heard, but this was the main idea I was communicating, that when we look at our species compared to other species, we're way more able. We have something that they don't. We technically shouldn't have imaginations. When you look at inferior species, these species are kind of like, uh, their environment is their imagination. So something is an added dimension to our species, which has made it separate from the environment. And I feel what that is a wave. So I feel really what it is consciousness and matter are two different dimensions that are alive. And this concept that dimensions are alive, I find it's a new concept, but it was kind of introduced to me when in my inner realms, I saw living geometry, which the implication of it is that we think we are alive, we think the world isn't. So when we think there are other dimensions, we think those other dimensions are also like parallel lifeless worlds. But if we for a second considered that our intelligence is the world's intelligence, it's another way of saying that all the dimensions of reality that hold within them all the creatures of reality are all alive. So it's as if the world has past lives too, not just the person in the world. Do you know? The person has also future lives, and so does the world. But what I'm saying is it's an archetypal evaporation. The idea of the egoic construct is evaporating to, and not evaporating. I mean, I gotta say something, but it's like our consciousness is our ability. And to live a conscious life is to actually be able to see the ride. The ride of life is not, I think, per se, like life is kind of like a wonderland, but the ride starts, the roller coaster ride starts the moment you open your eyes. Phenomenology, everything, considerations, ideology, all of that requires to be accessible. And the easiest way is that the best way I think to use a tool is not to think that tool, it's like not to have an opinion on that tool. So, for example, when I speak, there's this constant, not an idea, but like I'm just aware of it, that the language contains fragments of truth, but doesn't contain truth, because truth is a dynamism. You know, it's the inseparability of the unconscious macrocosm with the conscious microcosm, something like that. And I just want to see a civilization where it's not like a Venetian masquerade. You cannot ignore society when you're alive, and you shouldn't even. Like, let me tell you, society, it's not designed well now, but if it was designed well now, would be such an incredible resource. I have this vision that in the future, human beings will attain a sort of clarity that their governance all the government powers leading them will just become resources. That means there was this concept of succession that the ancients, especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they kept alive, the oral transmission of a living experiential truth. That's pretty much it. That's the value of Zen, really. That they have kept alive a clarity prior to the ignorance. Therefore, the way out of suffering, I feel Buddha realized, was to not see the concept ever exist. And I've had times, guys, I'm telling you, language is like, this is hilarious, but check this out. Imagine a person's like, I don't want to eat animals, and they're beings. And then the person's like, they're alive. And then the person's like, okay, you don't have to eat animals. And then the person's like, I don't want to eat plants. The person's like, whoa. And the person's like, because they're alive too. And the person jokingly says, okay, what are you going to do? Eat dirt then? And the person's like, I'm not going to even eat dirt. Because I'm not going to even eat dirt because the dirt is alive. You know? Then it reaches a point where the person's like, I'm not going to even think because the thought is alive. Do you know it becomes eventually a situation where you got to kind of realize that energy, I don't know how much energy cares for how it looks like. But for me, it's our personalities and our cultural programs seems to be projecting that care. In a hilarious way, I can kind of see how all attempts at speech has been throwing sound at an unknown cosmos. Like those, Museum of Modern Art, the artist just splashed paint on a canvas and that was the modern art. It's something interesting is that um, intelligence without attention has no direction. That means before a person seeks knowledge, they should wonder about what is here right now. It's like when you read a book, where is that? Where are those ideologies in that book going? You know? In Vedanta, there's this concept of lila, Leela, you know? And the concept of lila was the concept known as play. And it meant that life is simply a game that keeps creating and continuing in and as the game. And the concept of enlightenment had a value because it was the only opportunity the living being had was in their conscious waking state to administer consciousness, to wonder. That means it's like some questions, yes, they are unnecessary to ask. But some questions you only get one lifetime to ask. And most people, I've noticed this, they are looking for outside, something outside, so you can see what tomorrow looks like. I had this poetic vision that it's as if the sun shouted as if no spheres in the cosmos will be left alone, and even the eyeball of man, uh, you know, felt the caress of the light beam. Yeah. I feel that languages evolve simply by people staying true to their experiences and just going with nature. You know, on some level, we can't even, you can give any story to this work of art in front of you, which is this world. But on another level, it is being something before you name it. You know, it's like I feel a beautiful way, a beautiful vision is something where it's as if um, the world sees you because it knows you see it. You know, in Rishi Vyasa in the Mahabharata, there are stories that gods would come to sages and yogis and to get advice from them. Gods. And somebody would be like, whoa, why does a god need advice from a yogi? And it was this idea that in the lesser dimensions beneath man's evolution, beneath the human, it was like they were not conscious to ask the question. And in higher dimensions where the gods received endless offerings, it was as if they had too many, they already had the answer and they never needed to ask the question. And it was only in this kind of human life where the question and answer remained unknown. And that unknown fascination was a direct access to what I feel is another poetic way of saying it is the universal mind field that we're all in, you know. If anybody has questions, I've reached the end of the talk, but I'm really pumped up right now with these ideas. So if anybody has a question, now would be a good time. And if not, then silence shall lead the way. The Diamond Sutra said one thing: keep your mind alive and free without abiding in anywhere or anything. An ultimate solution to a language worshipping civilization that for the first time sees it can walk different. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.